we will go ahead and get started. Okay. So we welcome everybody. We apologize for the little glitch, but we are here. We are glad you are here. And we would like to, let's see, go to our technical slide.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. And so this presentation, the slides will appear in the main window while the speakers will appear in the top corner or at the bottom of your screen. And also at the bottom of your screen is the menu bar. Here you'll find the chat, raise hand, Q&A, and closed caption functions. Please use the chat box to report any technical issues you are experiencing. We'll respond to those concerns as they come in. Next to the chat box is the raise hand feature. You're able to use this during our open comment segment to let us know when you'd like to unmute your mic, so you can either ask a question or post a comment. Another way you're able to submit questions or comments is using the Q&A box itself, where you can leave your question or comment at any point during the webinar for the presenters to address during our segment later at the end. Lastly, live captioning is available for today's broadcast. You simply can click the CC icon to use this feature. And then please note today's webinar is being recorded for note-taking purposes. Dr. Payment, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. I want to welcome everybody. But first we want to do what we do in Indian country and open in a good way. And one of my really good friends who does an excellent job with opening and chairing meetings, Patsy Whitefoot, would you please do an opening for us? Tom, could you unmute Patsy? So I see that, oh, there we go.
Okay, there I go. Shik Pachwe Inknashwinik Shashtwaput Ku Pashinwiki Patricia Whitefoot. Good day, everyone. I'm greeting you from the homelands of the Yakama Nation. I'm here in the community of Yakama and look forward to the discussion we're going to have today.
Thank you.
And if there's no recording, please, I ask for no recording as I just share this opening with all of you.
Oh, yes. So from one special friend and leader to another, I'd like to introduce Larry Wright, Executive Director for the National Congress of American Indians and former Chairman of the Ponca Tribe. Larry Wright.
Oh, thank you, Aaron. Ponca Moshe, Ongi de, Omba de, Wiki de go, they know hick de Wiblahan, Ponca Moshe, Adashwahan, de Wanoche, Larry Wright Jr., Ijazek te abdi, Wishti, Usni Ponca bli, Wachpadante, Wongi de, Wibli Stuba, Wibli Ejuba bli, Dengo, Adon Neoshinga, Ishage, Waunjiga, Edi Dagri, Daon Dagidaga, Wiblahan. Thank you, Dr. Payment. My name is Larry Wright Jr. I'm the Executive Director for the National Congress of American Indians. I'm a citizen of the Ponca Tribe in Nebraska. My Ponca name is Buffalo Spirit. And I thank all of you for joining us today. I know everyone's got busy schedule, and understand the importance of our topic here today. We want to just talk about some of the work that NCAI has done over the years. Been a long time advocate for get out the vote, and we want to make sure that we continue that. And we have a short time frame before the elections this year, but we want to make sure that NCAI is doing everything that it can to help Indian country in the best way that we can, and be a continued partner and making sure that our issues are addressed. And at the very basis of everything that we do for Indian country is making sure that the government upholds its trusted treaty responsibilities, and making sure that we can make sure that we elevate the message of the importance of voting. And we know throughout Indian country, not everybody agrees with the election process or how it's set up, or how it's even, in many cases, stacked against Indian country. And so we want to make sure that we continue to support our partners, those that do amazing work on the ground, day in and day out, in their states, their communities, and make sure that we're doing everything we can to help that. We talk about, this year we celebrate the Snyder Act, the 100th anniversary of Native people becoming citizens of this country. And we know the right to vote didn't happen for everyone, even until the 60s. And even today, as it was shared in our last webinar, the attacks on our voting rights and the continued push to try to eliminate and keep us out of the vote, regardless of who we're voting for. It impacts all of our Native voters. So we want to make sure that we continue to be a strong partner for you all and to listen to you and see how we can become even better. To that end, as Dr. Payment said, I served as a chairman of my tribe for 11 years. So I'm a recovering tribal chairman, but I'm also a recovering teacher. And I taught civics and government at the high school level for many years. And one of the quotes that I used with my classes that I think is still relevant today, even though this quote's over 100 years old, bad officials are elected by good people who don't vote. And we want to make sure that Indian country is heard from, regardless of who they vote for. And we want to make sure that we give them all the tools that are needed to help with that for Indian country. Before we go any further, I do want to recognize Lonnie Taylor, who is an alternate area vice president for the Rocky Mountain region, and give her an opportunity to say a few words. Lonnie? Didn't mean to put you.
Hello, can you
Hello.
hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Dante Giwa, Bisma Bisko Nisigasun Asni Watite Gutinia. My name is Lonnie Taylor. My Cree name is Rainbow Feather Woman, and I come from Rocky Boy, Montana, Chippewa Cree tribe. Yes, I've sat on this board just since this past November. It's been quite the learning experience. I do sit on our tribal council here. I'm board meaning the NCAI as an alternate vice president for the Rocky Mountain region. So, but I'm really happy to listen in, to be able to attend. We just got done with one of our tribal admin meetings. It was from 9 o'clock this morning until 1:30. So. Yeah, we multitask a lot, and I've learned that over the last almost 4 years. So, but yeah, thank you, Larry, for everything you do. And that native vote is super important. In Montana, the state of Montana here, it's we've got I think 13 different tribes and 8 reservations. And so it's very important to get the word out, to try to get all of our 18-year-olds and our elders, and of course everyone in between. But yeah, I can't say enough on how important that is to get that out. So I'm on that same boat, Larry.
Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Next, we have a special message from NCAI President Mark Macaro.
Mayuyam. My name is Mark Macaro, President of the National Congress of American Indians and Tribal Chairman of the Pechanga Band of Indians. Welcome to NCAI's Get Out the Vote webinar series. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the Snyder Act of 1924, which granted U.S. citizenship to America's first people. Voting is likely one of our most consequential constitutional rights. This webinar will serve as a vital tool for tribal leaders on how to mobilize our tribal citizens. The native vote can be the deciding vote this election. Be the margin of victory, honor the past, and prepare for the future. Thank you.
And we thank President McCarr for taking the time. I guess I conjured up old teacher things. You get ready for a class and put everything's ready to go and something doesn't work, but so a little glitch there, so I apologize for that. But I know our team, it worked the last time, so thank you for that. The message is still good. Next, I'd like to turn to Dr. Payment. Dr. Payment is our designated NCAI Get Out the Vote campaign manager. Dr. Payment.
All right, Ani Buju, Biwakajiganishinakas, Mako Migizi and Donum, Awating and Donjaba. Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Odawa, Otawatami, and Dao. I'm very grateful to be here. Very grateful to be a longtime family member of the National Congress of American Indians. As you might recall, I was regional VP for the Midwest a while ago, secretary twice, first vice president twice, and also served with my auntie Patsy Whitefoot on the National Advisory Council on Indian Education. I'm also back in council in my tribal council. And we do have a small group today, but I will tell you, I'm looking at the group. We have some aunties on the call that I think are going to help mobilize us today with lots of really good ideas, experienced warriors over the years on and Native Get Out to Vote. So we should have a very lively discussion today. So just to cover the agenda real quick, we want to talk about the importance of exercising our right to vote, emphasize that we can be the margin of victory. We're going to talk a little bit. Larry will do a deeper dive on what a tribal sovereignty ticket looks like. And then I'll cover some policy issues that are important to tribal nations. Then we're going to do some discussion about mobilizing and activating our tribal citizens. Then we're going to open it up for a tribal leader discussion. And then final and closing comments. And so with that, I want to, next slide. I want to share with you the purpose of this project. The National Congress of American Indians, again, has been involved in Native Get Out to Vote as a hub and recognize that a lot of other national Native orgs, regional orgs, and state level intertribal groups and individual people that have been very engaged in mobilizing our people to vote. So NCAI is proud to be at the hub and contracted with Kaufman and Associates, a Native woman-owned company. Our president is Joanne Kaufman. She's Nez Perce, and she likes to say that we do work that matters, and it's absolutely, she's been engaged for about 40 years and in doing work and supporting Indian country. And so we're grateful to be part of this project. So our purpose is to urge tribal nations and their citizens to register to vote, to urge Natives to vote for candidates who support the treaty and trust obligation, to appreciate the role of campaigns and elections in setting the agenda. And then our deliverables are a launch video and trusted messenger videos. We've got some Indian celebrities queued up to when we post out those trusted messenger videos. So we're really excited about that. And our president, Mark Macaro, has done a launch video for us that really kind of frames the importance of Indian country participating. We also did a refresh of NCAI's Native Get Out to Vote website. A lot of good stuff was there. We just had to kind of update it and make it more accessible. And then we're doing these information webinars all across Indian country, across the 12 regions, organized into 2 or 3 per region. We also will have a training guide to assist tribal leaders with how to deal with earned media and to invite that because we want the media and we want candidates not to take us for granted. So we're going to do some training there and some coaching. And then disseminating NCAI's National Native Get Out to Vote toolkits. And exciting, and we'll have Larry talk about it a little bit later, is some mini grants, because it's one thing to make stuff available. It's another to help tribes to be able to push the information out. So there are resources that will be available for tribes to help push the information out. Okay, so next slide. So I'm going to pose a couple of rhetorical questions. Why should American Indians, Alaska Natives vote? Does my vote really matter? Does sovereignty diminish by participating in voting? Should I vote D for Democrat, R for Republican, or I for Indian? Is it too late to register to vote? How do I register and where do I vote? And how about absentee voting? How do we find that information out? Okay, when tribes signed treaties ceding nearly 1 billion acres of Indian land in exchange for provisions of health, education, and social welfare into perpetuity, our ancestors secured a commitment for funding federal programs and services forever. While these rights are generally upheld through judicial precedents, they depend entirely on who is in office. While American Indians and Alaska Natives were granted citizenship 100 years ago, a guaranteed right to vote didn't come until 1964 in the Civil Rights Act, but we still have challenges today, and we know that. And so it is our solemn duty and right to vote. So please help us to get the word out to please exercise our right to vote. And yes, your vote does matter. President Kennedy won his election in 1961 by just 100,000 votes, an average of 1 vote per precinct. The 2016 presidential election in Michigan was decided by just over 10,000 votes. The number of Native Americans in Michigan in 2020 was 110,000. We can absolutely be the margin of victory. And you get to help decide who is president and who controls the House and Senate. Let your vote be for candidates who support a tribal sovereignty ticket. Voting does not diminish tribal sovereignty. Just as most Americans can vote in local, state, and federal elections, so too can Natives, but we have another level of citizenship and representation through our vote. If you vote in favor of candidates who have a platform supporting the treaty and trust obligation, you strengthen our sovereignty. If you prioritize the impact of federal government on tribal sovereignty and federal funding as Indians, we win. Who you vote for is entirely up to you. You are encouraged, however, to research the candidates and ask the tough questions of how they will serve you as an American Indian. It's not too late to register to vote, but this varies based on jurisdiction. So we ask you to please go to nativevote.org to learn how to register in your respective state, how to secure absentee ballots, or where to vote in person. We'll share that information. And so let's talk about, next slide, let's talk about being the margin of victory. And so I've got some data for you. Those of you who know me know that I'm a little bit of a nerd when it comes to data. I'm a quantitative social scientist. So the close margins in the last two presidential elections suggest that the lack of a Native-focused campaign in 2016 and then courting the Native vote in 2020 may explain how key battleground states turned from red to blue and decided the election. Data shows that the proportion of Natives is multiples greater than the win or loss margins in key battleground states. Here you can see some maps of some of those battleground states, and we're going to do a little deeper dive on the proportions. So Michigan was won in 2016 by 0.2%, while the proportion of voters who are Native in the state in 2020 is 2.3%. Michigan was won in 2020 by 2.8%. In Arizona, in 2016, the margin of victory was just over 4%, and the proportion of Natives is 16%. Natives in Arizona are a big deal. In 2020, Arizona was won by 0.3%. We are definitely a factor. The same battleground states are in play with this year, with polls within the margin of error. This means that the Native vote may just decide the 2024 election. You can see also in North Carolina, right now the polls are very close. The proportion of American Indians is 3.9%. In Wisconsin, 2.7%. And in Nevada, 6%. So we can make the difference. We absolutely can be the margin of victory. So next, I would like to hand it back over to Executive Director Larry Wright, who will share some key elements of what a tribal sovereignty ticket looks like.
Thank you, Dr. Payment. Thank you for that. Yes, when we talk about the sovereignty ticket, we're talking about candidates who, on either side, regardless of political affiliation, who will advocate for the trust and treaty responsibility that this government has to our Native people. As we all know, the relationship between the federal government and tribal nations has been reaffirmed through Supreme Court judicial precedents, legislation, and administratively through executive orders, presidential memoranda, and proclamations. But to fully honor the treaty and trust obligation in exchange for nearly 1 billion acres of ceded Indian lands, funds appropriated by Congress in fulfillment of this great promise should be advanced appropriations, mandatory rather than discretionary funding, and not subject to sequestration restrictions imposed by and including OMB budget ceilings. Indian country funding should not be affected by federal funding uncertainties during budget negotiations or under continuing resolutions. And at this time, we're looking at that as being a potential issue again for us, as a new budget needs to be extended by the end of September. Achieving the classification as mandatory funding can be a significant challenge. However, in December 2022, Congress voted on advanced appropriations for Indian healthcare services. And for those that know, that was a 13-year fight to get that done. But moving Indian country from discretionary to mandatory and forward funding will truly honor those treaty and trust obligations. NCAI has long collaborated with tribal nations to enumerate tribal infrastructure needs and priorities. In 2017, NCAI testified that the backlog was in excess of $47.8 billion, with the breakdown as follows: $10.3 billion for IHS facilities, $12.5 billion for IHS sanitation, $1.3 billion for BIE schools, and $33 billion for Indian housing, and $20 million for multi-justice centers. While the 2021 Jobs and Infrastructure Act afforded record amounts of funding to tribes, the vast majority of our infrastructure needs remains. When it comes to land and trust, a clean carcieri fix is needed now. As late as 2018, proposed rulemaking would have granted a level of assent to local government to deprioritize tribal land and trust requests. Notwithstanding intertribal conflicts with land and trust issues, a streamlined and pragmatic process subject to less political ebbs and flows is needed. When we look at sovereignty issues, while the decisive outcome in Brackeen versus Holland upheld ICWA, threats to sovereignty and jurisdiction remains. NCAI has long partnered with NARF, the Native American Rights Fund, to watchdog court proceedings for possible erosion in jurisdiction and sovereignty. The McGirt decision suggests a positive turn in honoring Indian country jurisdiction. However, impacts of the Oliphant versus Squamish case remain, where tribes lost authority to hold non-Indians accountable for certain crimes on Indian lands. Enactment of laws to stabilize jurisdiction are needed to protect tribal sovereignty and ensure no holes in jurisdiction. These agenda items and more establish a tribal sovereignty ticket to look for when casting your vote. Next up, Dr. Payment will share a few federal Indian policy issues of importance to all of our tribal voters. Thank you, Dr. Payment.
All right, so a tribal sovereignty ticket. We're trying to coach and help facilitate candidates to adopt a tribal sovereignty ticket. So here's a couple more federal policy issues of significant importance to Indian country that we want them to understand, and it's our job to help educate them. All right, so according to the 2018 U.S. Commission on Civil Rights Broken Promises report, American Indians and Alaska Natives are more likely to live in poverty, be unemployed, experience rape or abuse, be killed by police, have an infant mortality rate of 1.6 times that of non-Hispanic whites, have low high school and college graduation rates, have the highest rates of drug and alcohol addiction, and the highest rates of suicide among adolescents. Also, according to the CDC, American and Alaska Natives have the highest rates of heroin and opiate-related deaths. And then this statistic is stark and tragic. In 2022, the CDC reported a drastic drop in life expectancy by 7 years for American Indian and Alaska Natives, bringing our life expectancy back 80 years. And we understand or believe that this is probably attributed to the opiate crisis and historical and intergenerational traumas that makes us susceptible to those addictions, and then also the pandemic. So, you know, in 2 years ago, the investigative report launched by Secretary Holland which was overseen by Assistant Secretary Brian Newland, shine new light on the responsibility of the federal government's instigating generations of historical and intergenerational trauma that explains the worst of the worst outcomes I just talked about. Volume 2 of the Newland report enumerates the cost of forced assimilation at $23.3 billion in net present value. Dollar per dollar, this expense is owed to tribal nations to return that which was taken, to heal and confront systemic impacts and the outcomes of federal Indian policy. Returning native languages and cultural ID will be a necessary step towards healing from the impact of historical and intergenerational trauma. So I want to talk briefly about the Affordable Care Act. In 2020, during the election cycle, we saw a commitment to expanding the ACA to states which did not accept Medicaid expansion. Since this time, the American Indian Alaska Natives residing in those states were permitted to sign up, but there is still a means test being used. Fully honoring the treaty and trust obligation for health suggests that qualifying American Indian Alaska Natives for the ACA Medicaid expansion should be done without regard to income and in creating an IHS portability similar to VA healthcare portability. This effort stands to significantly increase third-party revenues to tribal health, closing the gap between currently what's budgeted at $9 billion for IHS to the $50 billion that the IHS budget formulation work group has identified is needed. Let's talk briefly about codifying government-to-government relations. So in 2019, the Government Accounting Office report identified a significant proportion of federal agencies who have still not established consultation protocols with tribal nations. A presidential memo in 2021 directed all federal agencies to establish consultation policies within 90 days. And you remember that saying, be careful what you ask for? I remember doing over 65 consultations within those 90 days in 2021. But executive orders or presidential memos are only as good as who sits in the Oval Office. Congressman Grijalva introduced the RESPECT Act, but there are some concerns that tribal leaders have expressed with that draft. And any draft bill to promulgate consultation should follow consultation with tribes first, and then be representative of the needs of tribes as they give their input. So let's talk about climate change, environmental justice, and climate resilience. The ebbs and flows of who is president should not adversely impact climate resilience. Tribal nations are the first stewards of the land and natural resources. Climate change is real and should not be subjected to political ideological shifts. Vast amounts of job and infrastructure funds to confront environmental justice and climate resilience, including potable water and clean energy expansion, should be extended and shielded from any rescissionary efforts. Further, the backlog of Indian country infrastructural needs should be addressed with an energy independence focus. So look to these and other key policy issues that impact tribal nations and support candidates who support our issues. So next, we're going to, next slide, talk really quickly about mobilizing your nation and your tribal community. We want to remind you to go to nativevote.org. This is a website that NCI has had for quite a while, but we refreshed it and updated it. On that site, we have lots of tools to help mobilize your tribal nation to get out to vote. It includes guides that help you to share information about how to register and to vote. And we also developed a toolkit. And we'll have Larry talk in just a second about some mini grants that NCI is working on. So it's one thing to ask tribal communities to push out these get out to vote strategies, but it's another to help them and actually give them the resources to do that. And so there are resources that are coming. We also drafted up like a mini toolkit to how to manage media inquiry. We want to be part of the conversation. So, you know, remember when they said that we were something else, we were relegated as something else, and I do think we're something else. We're very important, but we want to help coach the media to not overlook us. So we will be asking tribal leaders to make contact and try to engage the media. NCI will work on that at the national level and try to get them interested and not take us for granted, because we really could be the margin, we will be the margin of victory. And then also there's some materials that will be made available. You can see my nice Go Vote Den t-shirt that NCI designed, and that logo and that design for Go Vote Den. And then we would like to have you share with us some of the opportunities that are happening in your region. And we would welcome the opportunity to come to your region to be able to share and try to mobilize people and plan events so that we can get your citizens excited and engaged in our Get Out to Vote campaign. Larry, do you want to talk briefly about what some of the mini grants might look like?
You bet. Thank you, Dr. Payment. Yeah, we're very excited about where we're at today in this project and trying to elevate the message of Indian country. And to be clear and to be sure, NCAI is not trying to replace anybody that's doing the amazing work on the ground. We really are here to help elevate those messages and to elevate and highlight best practices that are working for different groups in different areas, and knowing that regardless of how people vote, that it is important to make sure that we identify candidates that are going to uplift and support issues that have a direct impact with Indian country. And to that end, one of the things that I'm very proud of at NCAI was the formulation of our foundation last November at the annual conference. And with the foundation, one of the key principles for that is civic engagement. And we really looked at going after the philanthropic dollars that are out there. And when we looked at that, you know, last year alone, over 400 billion with a B, $400 billion was spent in the philanthropic sector in the United States alone. But less than 0.5% of that went to Indian country. And NCAI saw a role on our platform that we could help facilitate that. And we've been I'm very happy to say we've been successful in less than a year of being able to do that. And one of the areas that is of importance for us is the civic engagement space. And that allows for us to be able to do the mini grants and re-granting. And so if you go onto the nativevote.org website, you'll see a tab on there for grants. And people that can apply are, you know, the grants are open to tribal governments, obviously, but also native-led 501c3 organizations and C4 organizations, as well as native vote collectives. And we want to get that funding to where it can have the biggest impact. You know, t-shirts are nice, and that's always part of every native project, but being able to get money to groups that will actually drive people to the polls and help with those kinds of things is much needed, and we know that. But to that end, eligible projects that would qualify are obviously increasing civic participation, the enhanced capacity of tribal organizations, comprehensive data and analysis tools development, youth and senior or elder engagement programs, strategic coalition building and collaboration, obviously communication and outreach efforts, and an increasing awareness and understanding of Native voting rights. And so all of those things would qualify for the mini grants. And we encourage people to share that information, push people to the website. And besides the mini grants, all the toolkits that were mentioned, and as we hold these webinars and continue our conversations with Indian country, we want to hear at NCAI how we can be a better partner to you all, and knowing that the work that you do day in and day out in this space, and how we can elevate that and celebrate it and share it. So again, best practices, not just in the key swing states, but also in all of your communities and our Indian communities as a whole. You know, we talk about the presidential election, that gets a lot of the oxygen in the room, and as well as Congress. But just as important for Indian country are the communities that we live. You know, we have the unique distinction of being citizens of our tribal nations, citizens of the states we live in, and citizens of this country. And those local elections, county elections, state elections are just as important as the national elections, because they can have a direct impact on our communities as well. So while the presidential election gets a lot of the attention, getting people out to vote on all of these levels is very important. So we want to make sure, this is just the start of the conversation for us in learning how we can help even more so. But please take time to go to the website and see those toolkits and different opportunities. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Payman.
All right, and I do have a comment in here for the I as a typo, but it's not actually. Jefferson Keel, former lieutenant governor for the Chickasaw Nation, the unconquered Chickasaw. He was quoted one time by saying, "Should I vote D for Democrat or I for Republican, R for Republican or I for Indian?" And so he was emphasizing that we should be looking for candidates that support us, and that we can transcend partisanship and support those candidates who very clearly have articulated platforms that serve us. Now, I could say that the likelihood is one candidate might be greater than others, but that's not up for us to say specifically here. But that is a direct quote from Jefferson Keel. All right, so with that, we do want to open up. Next slide. We want your active engagement and participation. Just raise your hand and we'll hand the floor. We have got a couple of questions that we want to just pose out. We have a lot of experience on this call. I'm looking forward to hearing from our native aunties to tell us what we should be doing. So we do want to hear that. We respect that. So what are your general feelings about the 2024 federal elections? Is your community engaged? And so when I ask that, we want to differentiate tribal citizens versus your employment team members, maybe your patrons. We are generally the largest employer wherever we are. And so that's a lot of employment team members, that's a lot of customers, and then your community members. And then what efforts are happening in your region that we could share with others. So let's hear it. There's my friend Julie Johnson, longtime political mobilizer and Native candidate supporter. Let's unmute Julie Johnson.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Larry for attending the AT&I Native Vote reception in Oregon. I was so surprised to see you there. I wasn't used to that. And I just really, really appreciated you being there and for speaking and just being supportive. People were saying, hey, the NCAI president is here. And it was just really neat. And then number two, I'm hoping, Larry, that you'll have a special workshop at the upcoming national convention at NCAI in our NCAI in Las Vegas. So I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said absolutely. And I want you to see me so much, Julie, that you get tired of me.
No, I like to boss you guys around, so don't worry about it. But I just want to share in just a couple of things that's going on in Washington State and the Northwest. We have 29 tribes in the state of Washington. I'm the chair of the Native American Caucus Committee. Patsy Whitefoot, I understand, I heard her, she's on, and she got me involved. And so I've been involved ever since she's told me to be involved. But first of all, we have 12 electoral colleges seats in Washington State. And this year we will have 3 Native people voting in the electoral college. So that's really important. And then a couple of years ago, we actually passed a Native rights bill in our state capitol. And Denny Hurtado from the Skokomish tribe and worked on it. And there was a bunch of people, and then Senator John McCoy, who passed away now, but they were really, really supportive. And then we just got over our primary elections in August 5th, 6th, I think it was. And for the first time in the history of the state of Washington, we had 5 Native candidates running for public office. 3 made it through the primary. But Patrick DePoe, who was running, he's a Makah, who was running for Natural Resources Commissioner, he got, first time out, he got 268,000 votes. And he didn't get elected, but he really had an outstanding showing. And right now I'm working on the upcoming AT&I conference for the Native vote. And I want to invite you, Larry, if you can come to that, or Aaron, I'm not sure how you guys are set up, but you're welcome to attend, let me know. So I've asked for a couple of things from AT&I. One is I'd like to have the 3 candidates from Washington State who made it through speak at the general session. Even if it's just for a couple of minutes, that's been approved. And then there's 2 Native women in Oregon that have made it through. So we will have a minimum at least 4 or 5 people speaking at the general session. And that will be on Tuesday. I'll send you the information. I'll send you the dates. And then we're having a Native vote reception on Monday night at 6 o'clock. I'll send you that invitation, Larry. And then the other thing, we're going to have a Native vote meeting. And I want to do a roundtable discussion this time. I want the 2 people that didn't make it through the elections to come to the meeting and talk about what the pros and cons were. We went through some racism like this one macaw, I don't know who's all on here, but so, but on this conference call, but there were just some ugly things that happened, you know? Like, this one young man, he's a macaw, they said, well, what's a chief gonna do when they deal with the whaling issues, you know, because the macaws can whale hunt. And so there was a few people that got ugly, and it was tough, you know, and we know we're gonna face that, but we've got to stick together and we've just got to be supportive. We have a group called the Washington State Conservation, and Patsy and I met with the executive director, and they've raised some money to hire some people to help get out the vote. And so we'll be working on that here in the Northwest. But and I'm a volunteer. Everybody that, you know, we're all volunteers that are doing this. You know, we've got some of the tribes now that have started to hire, you know, some native vote people to get out the vote. But, and we're working really hard to convince our tribes to do that. And my goal is that we need a native person at every seat in our state capitals and in Washington, D.C. And we also heard that there's a native person that's running for Congress in Arizona, Nathan, what's his name? But we invited him to AT&I and he's confirmed. And so he will also be there. I haven't met him yet, but you know, we're looking to support him. We need a native in Congress. So that's a little bit of what we're doing.
Hey, Julie, were you talking about Jonathan Nez?
Yes, I couldn't
Yeah.
say his last name, yeah.
Yeah, former president of the Navajo Nation.
Mhm.
And he was at annual last year. And he did win his primary. So, and he's in a district that it's kind of like it might be a little tiny bit red, but he is, there's a lot of Navajo in that district. So if there's a solid get out to vote, there's a very good chance Jonathan Nez might be congressman from Arizona.
Yeah, I've been doing some research on him, but we invited him and so then I asked the executive director of AT&I to talk to the executive committee and they approved it. So, and then he said he'd be here. So he's supposed to be here. I hope he'll be here for Monday for the reception and then, you know, for the meeting on Tuesday with the Native Caucus, Native vote. Is there anything else, Patsy Whitefoot? She's my boss, you know.
Hey, Tom, can you unmute Patsy? Okay, Patsy, you got to unmute now. You're still muted, Patsy. Maybe she's oh, there she is.
I just wanted to follow up on what Julie was saying. You know, previously and during the last election, there were two natives also involved in the electoral college. And as you know, that's what, you know, was a major issue the last election. So just to be aware of that. And that's when, you know, the government was shut down for, I don't know how long, but that is an issue we still are discussing about leading up to the electoral votes. And so the three tribal representatives are from, what's her name?
Alona Wilbur.
Oh yeah, Lona Wilbur from Swinomish, Julie Johnson from of Lummi, but lives on Makah, and myself again. This is, I think, my third time that I've been an elector, and I think it's Julie's second time. But this is really important to be aware of. And the other point that I want to make, when I first got started, when we got Senator Maria Cantwell in her position, what I did as a parent was to attend every basketball tournament I can, and I can tell you there are a lot of votes in basketball. where there are kids and their parents and grandparents are there. You meet a lot of people. So that's just, just one thing that I'd like to share with you is about getting out the vote. And of course, setting up our tables where we do, whenever we do, like of course, our Yakima Nation parade and all of those kinds of efforts. So we continue to do the work like Julie said, and just want to say thank you, Larry, and the tribes for having this discussion today. It's an important one. Thank you.
So just to echo what Patsy said about that election with Maria Cantwell, and then to balance it out, so it's not partisan, is remember Slate Gordon, the Indian hunter, when he was proposing to tax Indian country right around the time, a couple years after IGRA was passed, he was hot on that path, and Indian country backed and supported Maria Cantwell, and she won. But also to show you on the other side of the aisle, in Alaska, Senator Lisa Murkowski didn't make the primary, and Indian country supported a write-in candidacy. And so I remember people joking about with Alaska Native villages, everybody learning how to spell Murkowski as a write-in candidate, and the Indian country put her over the top, and she became Senator Murkowski, and has been one of our champions in Indian country. So there's an example on both sides of the aisle of where Indian country made the difference.
Right. Thank you, Aaron.
And Aaron, I want to share one more thing. In the Yakima area, where I'm going to speak for Patsy right now, and she's being humble, they went through a lot of issues on redistricting. And so they reorganized their district there. And there's a lot of Latinos in that area, and they've been supportive of us, as far as I know. So that happened this last year, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, in terms of redistricting that Julie said, the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians passed a resolution to support an individual to be on that commission, but it wasn't accepted. But we still need to continue doing that kind of work, as well as educating people about redistricting and the importance of redistricting, and also making certain we have representation. Thank you.
Thank you. I just knew we were going to get some sage advice. Alternate Vice President Lonnie Taylor, do you have any additional words of wisdom for us? Oh, you got to click on mute. Oh, you're still muted. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Hi, just really quick, I'll make mine short and sweet and hopefully to the point. But just going off the questions there, I am very hopeful for, the federal election. I just want to say that much, that I have a lot of hope and faith, I guess you could say, and who's out there, who's representing us at that level. Here in Montana, we have what they call a group called Western Native Voice, and they've been very instrumental in getting information out, registering people. I was acting all smart and going around and telling people to vote. Here I wasn't even registered, but they got me on there. So they're really good about, sorry, I'm in this my clinic hallway. They're really, like I said, they're really helpful. They've gone to all the tribes, all the reservation communities. They've done several activities to free bingos, walks,
Cool.
just different things like that. And I'm very interested in just to learn more about the Native vote reception. I would like some information, and perhaps I could help with one here in my community, and maybe, so if I could get that information, I would appreciate that, and we could get something going here, and I could share it with the other tribes here in Montana.
Awesome. Our friend Mandy Smoker Broadus is there, so she is always willing to help out too. So we'll put you in touch with her.
Awesome.
right,
Thank you, guys.
In the time we have left, does anybody not get a chance to chime in? Just raise your hand and we'll unmute you. All right. Then with that, oh, go ahead, Patsy.
Yeah, I just wanted to share very briefly about the workings of, the parties, and just for the individuals that are on the call, there are various types of subcommittees that the party has in place. And so I just happen to be on our party's resolution and platform committee, as well as being on the state executive board. And Julie's also on the state executive board as well. So those inner workings are real critical. And so it's important that we get tribal people in those kinds of positions. You could even run to be the president of your party, and all of those kinds of positions. And then there are congressional positions as well. So the congressional work is important. I happen to live in Central Washington, and I'm in the 4th Congressional District. Those are critical, to the work that goes on. And Julie lives on the other side of the state. She's up there, of course, we know, in Macau, and she's at the end of the earth, is what we say. And and so she's in another congressional district. So that work is important. Even at the legislative district there, in your community, you could sign up to be a precinct committee officer, which we both are, to, become involved. That's important. We need more people, involved in providing their voice to, particularly the platform and the resolution. So just wanted to share that briefly. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else before we run out of time? All right, any closing comments, Executive Director Wright?
I see Julie has her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Julie.
Larry, do I have permission to invite? I want to contact the executive director of AT&I and have her invite you, to try to get you on a general assembly. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'll just have to make sure I don't have another commitment, but if I don't, I will be there.
Okay, I'll ask her.
You're a hit, Larry.
Doing our best. Well, I'll just real quick then. Thank you, Julie. Appreciate all the work that you're doing, and everybody on the call. It definitely takes everybody that we can to get out the vote and make this an issue and get our people registered and not to just register, but to actually vote. And we definitely don't want this to be the end of the conversation. This truly is the beginning. We want to make sure that, as I said earlier, that NCAI is elevating your voices the best that we can in whatever way that might be. And so definitely, if there's other thoughts after this call on how we can help serve Indian country better, we definitely want to hear that. We do have other webinars this week. We have one tomorrow and 2 on Wednesday. So please pass the word. If your colleagues weren't able to be here today, they're more than welcome to register for any of those other times that might work for them. And we just want to continue to elevate the message, continue to do what we can to be great partners to all of you and the organizations that you work with locally, and really create a voice to share best practices and what's working with different organizations, and continue to advocate for funding so that we can get it to you where it's needed most. And so with that, I thank you all for the time and attention here today. And with that, Dr. Payman, I'll turn it back to you.
All right, I just have to say thank you all for being on the call. We can and will be the margin of victory.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone.
Mm.